Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Eruvin Daf Mem Dalid contains one main sugya, and then near the end of the Daf we have a Mishnah, which gets into another issue. So first of all, it's the sugya of creating a wall using people. And generally the issue is a temporary wall. You're allowed to create or build any temporary wall on Shabbos. It's a question of ohel. The Gemara is going to have a contradiction between two brises. The Gemara is going to try to determine what the two Tanaim are. What is the machlokes here? And the Gemara will end up abandoning the attempt to say that it's two different Tanaim and explain otherwise why the brises don't contradict each other. Then a couple of stories about carrying objects using walls of people. Then we get to the Mishnah, which takes us to the halachos of somebody who leaves his tchum with permission. Certain circumstances in which he's allowed to leave the tchum, such as to testify that he saw the moon for Rosh Chodesh, or for an issue of pikuach nefesh, to save somebody's life, and what his tchum is after that happens. So the Gemara picks up a few lines into the daf. We had seen that Rabbi Nechemia was stuck outside his tchum, and they needed a way to get him in, and Rav Chizda suggested that they can make a wall of people, and the people will connect him either to close to his tchum or to into his tchum so that he's able to walk back into the tchum, because the wall that is now surrounding him is all considered to be one large 4 amma rishos. Therefore he's allowed to do it. The Gemara asks, how are you allowed to make a wall of people on Shabbos? A wall of people is a temporary structure. Temporary structure is oil. We have an Isser D'Rabbanan of building a temporary structure on Shabbos called an Isser of oil. Building a wall accounts for that, at least so the Gemara seems to think. And the Gemara quotes a brisa that says that. Then the Gemara quotes a brisa that says the opposite, and the rest of the discussion will be trying to resolve the two brisas. So the first brisa says as follows. It quotes in Hilchos Sukkah. It says that if a wall of a sukkah fell down, you're not allowed to create a replacement wall either by having people stand there, or by having animals stand there, or by piling up kalim there, or by taking a bed even from inside the sukkah, where it doesn't look like you're building a wall, it just looks like you're standing the bed on its end in order to be able to have space in the sukkah, but you're not allowed to stand the bed on its end and spread a sheet over it. You're not allowed to do any of these things in order to replace the wall that fell down, because it looks like you are, it is creating an ohel. It is building a wall on Shabbos, and therefore all these things are forbidden. And on Yantif, it is forbidden as well. Now, the conflicting brisa with that is a different one that says that a person is allowed to make his friend into a wall in order that he be able to eat in the sukkah. He wants to have his friend and says, do me a favor, can you stand over there for a few minutes so that you could be the wall of my sukkah? He's also allowed to stand his bed on its end in order to be able to do that and spread a sheet over it. But there it's not for a sukkah, there it is in order to create shade for a dead person so that he shouldn't be in the sun and cause him to decay quicker. So we have this contradiction, and there's really two things here. There's people. Are you allowed to use people as a wall, and are you allowed to use a kli as a wall? The kli here would be the bed. Both those contradict each other. One, our brisa says you're allowed to use them, and one says you're not. So the Gemara tries 3 attempts to say who these people are. The first attempt is that this is a machlokes that we've seen before in Masechta Shabbos between Rav Elazar and the Rabbanan. That case is about placing a object in a window in order to serve as a shutter for the window. Of course, the window in the days of Chazal was really just a hole in the wall, and you would place an object in the window in order to close the window. The question is, are you allowed to do that on Shabbos? What's the issue? It's moistif ala binyan. You're building something into the wall. You're connecting it to the wall. It's like you're adding to an existing structure. So that is the machlokes. According to the Rabbanan, there's no problem of adding to an existing structure at all. The only problem is building a structure in the first place. Therefore, you're allowed to put the thing in the window, no issue. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, there is a problem. In order to get around it, you have to make sure that your window shutter is tied to the wall and hanging and not dragging on the ground. That way, it is already part of the wall. You're just placing it in the right spot, and that's not an issue. So the Gemara wants to say, so you see over here, this is a machlokes. Are you allowed to put in a temporary wall on Shabbos or not? So maybe that's our machlekes here as well. You're allowed to stand up or have a creation of a temporary wall to complete the sukkah, or to serve as an eruv, or to close in tchum. You're allowed to do any of these things. So the Gemara rejects this. The Gemara says that can't be. That machlekes is only about adding to an existing wall. Creating a wall in the first place, there was never any heter. The Chachamim never said that that's mutter, and therefore there's no such tzad. And that can't be with this machlekes. In our case, we were creating a wall in the first place. So Gemara tries another attempt. The Gemara says one is Rabbi Meir and one is Rabbi Huda. Which Rabbi Meir and which Rabbi Huda? They're arguing, can you use an animal to serve as a wall of a sukkah or not? Rabbi Meir says no, because the animal's going to walk away. Rabbi Yehuda says yes. So now the Gemara wants to say, so this machlokes would be the inverted opinions. According to Rabbi Meir, that a animal is not a reliable wall. So here, a person could also walk away. He's not a reliable wall. Therefore, you're allowed to use him as a wall. It doesn't count as a wall. It's not usher to do it because it doesn't qualify as a wall. According to Rabbi Yehuda, that it is a reliable wall. So you would not be allowed to set it up on Shabbos in the first place. The Gemara says, first of all, this cannot be the pshat here for many reasons. First of all, Rabbi Yehuda only says an animal. Rabbi Meir only says an animal is not a wall because he's going to walk away. A person, if you tell him stand here, he's going to stand here. There's no reason why he shouldn't. So therefore, that does count as a reliable wall. Second of all, you want to say that Rabbi Meir is the one who says that you're allowed to tell the person to stand there. How could he say that? Do we have the Rabbanon and we have Rabbi Eliezer, which we just told you. Nobody holds that you're allowed to set up a wall in the first place, even a temporary wall. There is nobody who holds it that way. Rabbi Meir is not he's not coming to argue on them. He's trying to tell you what's on the wall of a sukkah. What counts as a wall of a sukkah. He's not arguing on these two Tanoim as to what you're allowed to do in creating a wall on Shabbos. You don't see any alternating opinion says, no, you're allowed to create a wall in the first place on Shabbos. There is no such tzad. So you can't apply Rabbi Meir to this. Nobody holds that you're allowed to set up a wall in the first place on Shabbos. So the Gemara says, okay, we'll try a third answer over here. Really, that everybody in this mission is the Rabbanon. And they say that you're allowed to add onto an existing wall. There is a difference between the two brises. As far as standing up the bed or setting up kalim there, so one case is talking about the fourth wall of a sukkah, and one case is talking about the third wall of the sukkah. The third wall of the sukkah creates a halachic sukkah. To create a halachic sukkah, that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos, that's called making the wall. That's called making the structure. That's not called adding to an existing structure. The fourth wall, that's adding to an existing structure. That the Chachamim say you're allowed to do. If you look carefully at the words of the Brises, it does seem to indicate that the one that says you're allowed to stand up the wall is talking about where it's the fourth wall. Why? Because it says, Nafal dufna. Its wall fell down. That means it is an existing sukkah. And besides for its existing sukkah, it has an additional wall. Its wall. That fell down. That you're allowed to put up. That would be the fourth wall. We're discussing the fourth wall, which is not creating the sukkah. It's not making it halachically a sukkah. It's just adding on to an existing sukkah. Now, what are we going to do about the contradiction between people? You're allowed to use people as a wall, or are you not? Contradiction between the brises. So the Gemara says, simple. You're only allowed to use people as a wall if they don't know that they're being used as a wall. If you tell them you're being used, please come stand here, be a wall, that's usher. That you're not allowed to do. The Gemara says, well, in the case of Rabbi Nechemia, where they made the wall so that he could go into the tchum, it's logical that they knew what they were doing. They said to them, come stand here, Rabbi Nechemia has to get inside. So the Gemara says, no, they didn't tell him that. They just said stand here without explaining to him why. He says, what do you mean? Rabbi Chizda is the one who arranged it. He knew about it. So Rabbi Chizda wasn't part of the wall. He arranged it, but he himself did not join the wall. And now the Gemara has a couple of stories of people who carried on Shabbos using a wall of humans. The Gemara says that there was a wedding and they needed to bring water. So they brought water. It was people who participated in the wedding. I guess the wedding was over before Shabbos began. And they brought water. And the way they did it was they had a wall of people. The problem was that the people knew what they were there for, and therefore Shmuel was very upset at them. Shmuel said it was the wrong thing to do, and it was usher, because they're not allowed to do it if you know. And he gave them Malchus. He gave them Malchus Mardis. It's an issue derabbanan of creating a wall on Shabbos. Next thing Mar says, Rava was coming back from saying Shir on Shabbos, and he had a couple of flasks of wine or water that were in the street in Rosh Hashanah. So his shamish, his attendant, carried them in. It was a huge crowd walking, and when they passed over the flasks, there was a wall of people all around them. They didn't know that they were serving as a wall, so therefore he was able to carry it, and he brought it in. And the next Shabbos he wanted to do the same thing, and now Rava said no, because since he did it already once, it counts as if they know, even though they still don't know. But his repeat time, it counts as if they know already. Elsewhere says that Levi brought in straw, Zeiri brought in animal food, aspasta, and Simi Barchia brought water, all using this method of having people serve as a wall without their knowledge. Now we begin the Mishnah. Mishnah discusses the halacha of somebody who had permission to leave his tchum. What happens to him after he's outside his tchum? So, the case where somebody has permission to leave his tchum would apply to someone who had to leave for pikuach nefesh. That is, he had to save somebody's life, somebody who was sick or giving birth, or there was a fire, or there was a war, and he traveled outside his tchum in order to be able to assist, or somebody who went to tell Beis Din that he saw the moon, and therefore Rosh Chodesh is upon us. These people are allowed to leave the tchum. Me'ikar hadin, the real halacha should be that once they're finished their job, they're now stuck outside their tchum and they only have 4 amas in any direction. The Gemara says they made a special rule in order to not have a situation where people would be prevented from going in order to not be stuck. They said that they have a new 2,000 amma tchum that begins wherever they are when their job is over. So Mishnah says, what if somebody leaves to do the job, and along the way, once he's outside the tchum, they tell him, by the way, the job is done already. The person is already saved. Beis Din already heard about the moon. So his job ends right there on the spot. So the Mishnah says he has 2,000 amas in every direction from there. And then the Mishnah adds 2 mysterious lines. It says if he's within his tchum, then it's like he never left. And the second mysterious line, which we're not going to get to in this daf, is anybody who goes out is allowed to come back home. So first of all, the Gemara says, what do you mean if he's in his tchum, it's like he never left? Of course it's like he never left. He's still within his tchum. He never did leave. What do you mean it's like he never left? He never left. The Gemara says 2 explanations of what this means. Rabbah says it means that if he's in his tchum, he's still limited to his old tchum. He doesn't get a new 2,000 amma tchum from where he is now. You may have thought that since he left his house and he started traveling, so he has a new 2,000 amma circle around him that travels with him wherever he goes. And then whenever the job ends, that's where it stops. So this comes to teach us, no. That's not how it works. When it stops, he gets a new tchum right now if he's outside of his tchum. If ever he's within his old tchum, then he stays with his old tchum, and he's still limited to his original tchum when he began Shabbos. Now that's Rabbi's understanding. Simon Bar Chia has a different shot. He says we're talking about where the guy already left his tchum. The Mishnah, when it says if he's within his tchum, doesn't mean that he's still standing within his original tchum. It means that his new tchum that's given to him when his job is over, he has a new 2,000 amma tchum. If that overlaps with his old tchum, then he can go back into his old tchum and have his old tchum. Now once he's in his old tchum, he loses the new tchum. And there's a machlok is whether he has to go back or not. Machlok is achronim. But Rav Simi Bar Chia says there's an overlap, and the overlap gets him into his new tchum, and then he can travel the length of his new tchum, gets him back into his old tchum, and that old tchum now, once he's back within it, that is his tchum for Shabbos, and the new tchum disappears. So the Gemara says, what is the machlokes? Machlokes is there a concept of overlapping tchumen? If you have 2 tchumen that overlap, can you travel from one the full length of the other? Now it's rare that one person has 2 tchumen on one Shabbos. This is an example of a person that could have 2 tchumen. So Gemara says that Abaye said, I'll show you another case where you have 2 tchumen that do overlap, and you'll clearly see that overlapping tchumen is the thing. What's the case? Case is when somebody's spending Shabbos, he begins Shabbos in a cave, and the cave has 2 openings. So the halacha is he has a tchum around each separate opening. He has 2,000 amas around one opening and 2,000 amas around the other opening, because we don't know which opening he's going to leave from, and he has both. Now, if those 2 openings overlap, then he's allowed to travel from one tchum to the other outside the cave. He doesn't have to go back into the cave. He could leave the cave in one, travel all the way to the end of the tchum, and then into his next tchum that he has based on his other opening to the cave. He could travel between these tchumen outside the cave. So you see, overlapping tchumen is a clear halacha. So how can it be that Rabbah holds that there's no such thing as overlapping tchumen? So the Gemara says, Rabbah answered him, he said, what do you mean? That's very different. They're both tchumen exist simultaneously. When he began Shabbos, each door of his cave, each entrance of the cave, has a tchum. Both tchumen exist, they overlap, so he gets both. So for sure he could walk from one to the other. Here, the 2 tchumen are not simultaneous. When he leaves one, he gets the new one, and the old one disappears. You can't go back to the old one. Where do you see 2 overlapping tchumen that are non-simultaneous that both exist? So Abai says, I will show you a case of 2 tchumen that are overlapping and non-simultaneous. What's the case? Somebody who left his tchum, what does he have? He has 4 amas. He has a 4 amma limit around him. There's a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim. What if those 4 amas where he is now overlap with his existing tchum? Again, he still has his old tchum. He didn't lose the old tchum because he didn't get a new tchum. But he has his 4 amas. So if his 4 amas overlap with his original tchum, according to Rabbi Eliezer, he's allowed to go back. According to the Chachamim, he's not allowed to go back. So you see, according to Rabbi Eliezer, at least, your new 4 amas do overlap with your old 2,000 amas. You can go from one to the other. So Rabbi says, "What are you asking me a kasha from Rabbi Eliezer?" It's not a kasha on Rabbah, who says he holds like that shita. Maybe he holds like the Chachamim that there's no such thing as overlapping in that case. So Abaye says, yes, I'm right anyway, because the only case where Rabbah says that the Chachamim argue on Rabbi Eliezer is if it's not for a mitzvah. It's for a mitzvah, Rabbah holds the Chachamim agree to Rabbi Eliezer. And therefore Rabbah would also hold of overlapping Tchum in the case of a mitzvah. And here we're talking about somebody who wants to do a mitzvah, Rabbah should hold of overlapping Tchum. It doesn't make sense to say that he does not hold of overlapping Tchum, and it can't be the reason why he doesn't hold of Rav Simi Bar Chia's overlapping Tchum.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.